One of my great-grandfathers fled Scotland because of the Catholic persecution, and so he ended up over here on this shore. So, and then my great-great-grandfather came to Philadelphia from Scotland from Ireland as an Irish Catholic, and in 1838, and within a few years they were burning down the churches in Philadelphia. And although somebody mentioned that it was mobs doing that, the fact is a lot of the authorities were turning the other eye when these things happen. I mean, we tend to forget the complicity often of governments in mob violence, and that was something very evident recently in Egypt, where they allowed these mobs, who were actually government thugs under the guise of being mobs. So that often occurs also. But you know, my own Irish Catholic roots, my name is Hanson, but it's actually O. Hanson. So they dropped the O and pretended not to be Irish because there was an ethnic backlash against Irish Catholics, not Ulster Irish, right? Not Protestant Irish. It was very different being a Protestant Irish in this country. But we're here next to Maryland, where Lord Baltimore, I mean, we have the first really religious edict of toleration in the United States, even though it was very limited in its scope, recognizing Trinitarian differences within the community, but it was here. And then Thomas Jefferson right next door in Virginia with the Toleration in the state of Virginia, and arguing in a letter that he wanted to see an America that was safe for the Christian, the Jew, the Mohammedan, the Hindu. I mean, I was quite stunned to find him mentioning the Hindu when I first read that many years ago, and the atheist also. So it's very interesting because the atheists, I mean, in the previous panel, somebody mentioned about, you know, there's no religion of one, and I think that's arguable. I mean, every religion begins with one person. So Jesus at one point was the only Christian around, and the Prophet Muhammad was the only Muslim at one point. So religion begins with one. And Jefferson, to quote him again, I'm staying in the Monticello Hotel over there, so it must be affecting me. But Jefferson also said, I am a sect of one. So I think he relished that idea. And in the West, I think individualism has been so prominent in modern Western tradition, whereas in the East, you still have much more of a communitarian society. So if you go to these societies, the community is very important. And I lived with Bedouin and I spent 7 years with Bedouin. So I got to really understand the pre-modern tribal mentality, which is a very interesting mentality because on the one hand, they have a lot of egalitarian qualities, and they're actually quite democratic in many ways. This was in West Africa, in Mauritania. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to split off from the tribe. I mean, they all have eccentric uncles, like the English tolerate the eccentric Englishman in the family. So I think eccentricity has always been tolerated at the individual level. But when one half of the group breaks off from the other half, and it really creates an immense amount of trauma in a society. And I think this is, we're dealing with some really profound and problematic issues in this issue, especially when you look at the Muslim countries. If you want to look at the state of the Muslim countries, I mean, they have some of, I have when I found out that Nigeria, they do these corruption indices, and Nigeria was #1 in the world for corruption, and #2 was Pakistan. But a Pakistani friend of mine said actually Pakistan was #1, but they bribed Nigeria to take #2, #1 position. So I think the Muslim countries certainly immense amount of dysfunctionality. But I think it's really important to remember first and foremost. We sit in our smugness very often in the West and not remember the fact that we have been through immense religious wars to get to where we are. I mean, we forget how much blood was shed to hear Breathe Free and be able to sit up here on this panel and talk about things. Much of that was done by people that were actually trying to mitigate the influence of religion in society, many of them free thinkers.